Okay, so in my previous session, I talked about how to create the new web API and some of the fundamental concepts like, what is there inside the startup.cs, what is dependency injection and middleware. And we also talked about the configuring the Swagger using the swashbuckle. And so if you have not watched the previous video, I would recommend to watch the previous video before continuing on this session. So I'm going to talk about how to create the proper CRUD operations in the ASP.NET Core Web API in this session. So just to save some time, I've already created the project and created some operations. I'm going to walk through just so that we can save some time instead of creating runtime. So let's take a look at the code here. So once the Swagger is configured, Swagger allows to create the the customized UI, things like that. So like to avoid the noise for the XML comments, I also configured the XML configuration for the Swagger UI as part of the previous video. So right click on the project properties and click on the build. So here XML documentation file. So if you check this, it will by default give the root folder where the XML file is going to be created for Swagger definition, Swagger specification. So I've also added this code 1591 for suppressing the warnings. Either you can add here or you can click on the edit project. If you add no warn 1591, so that unnecessary warnings will be suppressed, because that was so annoying. That's why I suppressed those warnings. So coming back to the CRUD operations in the web API, just to show the proper demo, I'm going to show you this is I've created a feedback model. So there is a class called feedback.cs. You can submit the feedback, like as part of my application, one of the requirement is to submit the feedback. So you can enter the name, email ID, subject, and message you want to post. And I'm also creating the unique ID. So this is my request object. So I can even name it as feedback request, so that it is more specific to the web API. So I'm going to do the operations on this feedback model. Now I've created an interface called iFeedbackController to support get all the feedback, get particular feedback by passing the ID, which returns the feedback, and the first one returns the collection of feedbacks. Delete feedback, pass the ID and say delete so-and-so feedback, and return value is Boolean. Same thing, create the feedback, passing the feedback object. So the reason I created a interface on top of the controller is for supporting the unit test cases. So I'm going to take another session on how to create the unit test cases. Then open the feedback controller. So start with the controller. So feedback controller inherited from the controller base. As I discussed in my previous session, don't inherit from the controller, because the controller is actually inherited from the controller base. So controller base is specific to the web API. So make sure that you inherit from the controller base and implement the iFeedback controller in the feedback controller. Then I'm decorating with the producers. Make sure that it produce the JSON response, and then configure the routing. And this is dynamic. Make sure that you will use the dynamic way of using the routing instead of hard coding the controller name. Then these are the XML comments for the Swagger. I'm using the XML comments, and we will be able to see these XML comments on the Swagger UI. And then this is my get method, and this is my route URL. Route URL is going to be API/controller name is feedback/get feedbacks. So that's the path for this get method. And then I'm also using the different response type, produces response type of feedback object, list of feedbacks, and when it returns the 200 status, returns the 400, it's bad request, 401 unauthorized, 422 in case if the client is passing the wrong input object as part of the request. When we validate, we can return the status code 422. So in this method, this is not applicable. We can remove this. 500 internal error. In case if there is any exception happens, we can return the 500 internal error. So let's take a look into the method name get feedbacks. So get feedbacks returns the enumerable of feedback. Then I'm actually using one mock static class to get a list of all the feedbacks. So let's go to the mock. Since I'm not doing the database operations for now, I'm going to show with the mock data. Feedback mock. We can initially we can show this data, but runtime, since I have created all the operations, first we can insert one entry and then get the list of feedbacks. So since this is a static class and using the static collection, and this will return the list of feedbacks. So if it is null, then create the instance and collection returns empty when we call first time. When you call insert into the static class, and then there is another operation delete, deletes from the collection. So this is the mock data since we are not calling the database. Coming back to the controller, get feedbacks. All the feedbacks, if it then return the status code. And I'm also using the try catch block so this is the only place I will be using the try catch and in my entire web API. So I will talk about how to use the best practice on the try catch block. So if there is an exception, let's return the status code 500 internal error along with the message saying that error while trying to get the feedback and whatever the message it is. Then throw the exceptions. It's not going to be in use, but yeah, it returns from here itself. So this is the get feedbacks. The next one, get a particular feedback. So again, the get method, API/feedback/get feedback, and you need to pass the feedback ID to get the particular feedback. Again, I'm using the status codes 200, 404, not found, bad request, unauthorized. So whichever is applicable, we can use it. For now, I'm using all of them, but not necessary to use all. Whatever has been used inside the method, we can use it. Now, if we are doing the validation, some sort of custom validation, for example, I want the ID to be between 0 to 10. If it is out of the range, then let's say status 422 unprocessable entity, invalid ID. So something like that we can return. And then inside try get the feedbacks for a given ID, and if it is null, then return not found. Not found is like 404. If it returns, then return the actual feedback. If there is an exception, again find an internal exception. Now next one is the delete. So just like HTTP get and HTTP post, we can use HTTP delete, and then route URL is delete feedback. Pass the ID for deleting, and then so delete gets the feedback for the given ID, and then call the delete method, either database call. Here I'm using the mock class for deleting the object. Same thing with the create. So creating the feedback object, you need to pass the object as part of the form body. This is very important. And then this is going to be the post, HTTP post. And these are the same status codes. So insert feedback here. It gets the existing feedbacks, add it to the collection, and return true for returning as part of the feedback. So these are the CRUD operations. Startup.js file, CS file is going to be the same, not changed as part of the adding the feedback. So let's run the application and see how it look like. So now Swagger is showing up. When you click on the Swagger specification, you can see all the Swagger specification, Swagger.json file here. Let's talk about, so we already talked about the Swagger details earlier. Now, if I want to create a new feedback, then say try, I can give some ID, and we can give the name. Then email ID. Then test some message test, and then say execute. It will validate. I'm using the model validator. So if it is valid, then it will go and insert and click OK. So status code returns 2 with the 200. So that means the value is inserted. Let's take a look at the value which is inserted. Try to run. So the one which we have inserted is returned here. Let's get that particular ID by passing the ID here. Just pass 1. So I can get the data. Just like here, I am using the example. So this is something we can do in the code. If you want to keep more details to the end client, we can keep as part of the comments. For example, here as part of the XML comments, I'm using the sample ID equal to 5. That's what going to be displayed there. So it's going to be more customizable, more user friendly. If I want to delete the feedback which I have created, click on feedback, delete. Remove. It got deleted. So now if I go click feedbacks, execute again, there is nothing. So this is all about the how to create the CRUD operations. Thank you.